welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. I'm Roby Brock. Do we have a solution for the U.S. Speaker of the House? Maybe. It was another raucous and rowdy week in the nation's capital as Republicans in the House of Representatives, with their slim margin of advantage, spent the whole time trying to pick a leader to replace the ousted Speaker Kevin McCarthy. I caught up with U.S. Representative Steve Womack, Republican from Rogers, who represents the 3rd District of Arkansas, for his thoughts. Joining me now, Congressman Steve Womack. He represents the 3rd District of Arkansas, Republican from Rogers, at the end of a grueling week. Representative Womack, thank you for making time for us.
Roby, always good to be with you, and you are absolutely right. It was a grueling week, and I'm glad that week is over, but we may have more drama next week. We'll see.
I believe that we will. So as we're talking here at the end of the week, Jim Jordan is no longer the speaker designate for folks to vote on. You voted against him, and I want to get to the reasons for that. But you're going to basically be starting from scratch, I guess, when next week begins. Tell me what your opposition to Representative Jordan was and kind of how things played out here in the last day of this whole drama.
Yeah, and thanks for giving me a chance to explain, because let me tell you, over the last couple of days, Roby, I've gotten a lot of advice from all around the country. And it's kind of like that knee-jerk reaction of somebody who's pretty popular because of his appearances on cable news and the work he does in judiciary. Jim had a lot of very populist support around the country, and I understand that. And I had a private conversation with Jim at noon on Monday of the week, and I told him I was going to oppose his speakership, and here were the reasons. You know, first of all, there are certain skill sets and qualities that I think a person has to have to be the Speaker of the House, and I thought he fell short of a lot of those. His persona is polarizing, and he's kind of a known attack dog sort of guy in the Judiciary Committee. And as a Speaker of the House, you've got to have some statesmanship ability. You're going to have to work in divided government with all sides. And I mean, you're the Speaker of the whole House. And I just think that his qualities, his persona kind of fell short of that. But that was not enough necessarily to stop him in his tracks. But we had a vote the week before when the majority leader stepped up to the plate, Steve Scalise, and said, I'm going to run for Speaker, and actually beat Jim Jordan in our private conference for Speaker of the House. He became our Speaker designee. And then Jim did something that I told him I could not forgive him for. He went to the microphone, all of us expecting him to say, hey, I came up short. Steve's our nominee. I'm going to throw my support behind him. Let's go to the floor, get him elected. That's not what he did. Roby stepped up to the microphone and he qualified his endorsement by saying, if Steve Scalise can prove that he can get 217 votes in this conference, then I'll support him. And you and I both know that was not going to happen. And it's probably not going to happen next week with whomever we nominate.
Well, let's talk about
he qualified his endorsement, and that served, in my opinion, as a dog whistle to his supporters to make sure that Scalise could not get 217. So Scalise worked on those opposition votes, and then 24 hours later decided to step aside, which was a classy thing to do, but it was all caused because Jim Jordan kneecapped him in that process.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you for the backstory on that. Let's talk about who might be out there at this point in time. I'm probably as much.
Maybe we should go to the
as you do. So
let's go to the A's in the alphabet. Okay, well, maybe we ought to start there.
Well, that would take a while to work down to W, where Womack is.
Yeah, well, and we'll find somebody before then. But no, members of the House that look in the mirror every morning see the next Speaker of the House right now. And there'll be a lot. You know, Jack Bergman said he's going to run. He's been running for 2 or 3 days. Kevin Hern from Jack's from Michigan. Kevin Hern from Oklahoma. Austin Scott, who mounted a late campaign against Jim Jordan first time around and lost, came kind of close, but lost to Jordan. I think he's going to give it another go. You know, Patrick McHenry may run. Mike Johnson from Louisiana may run. I mean, there will be a lot of people, but every one of them are going to have the same difficulty. And that is, if they become our nominee, then they got to get 217 votes on the floor of the House. And we are a fractured, stubborn, divided bunch right now. Hard feelings, a lot of open wounds. So who is that individual that's going to be able to get everybody to coalesce around them? And I'm going to predict to you that maybe none of them. And if that happens, then we'll either be stuck in neutral again, spinning our wheels, or maybe some Democrats decide, hey, we could accept this person over here and be willing to kind of finesse a vote where that person could get the nomination, win the speakership. I don't know. But at some point in time, Roby, we got to elect a speaker. And when we do, it will be a Republican speaker. It will be a conservative person. It will be somebody who can work kind of both sides of the aisle and deal with divided government. We are going to do that. We're not going to elect Hakeem Jeffries. So people just don't think that's an outcome that's possible. It's just not going to happen. We will elect a Republican speaker, and I'd like to do it Tuesday or Wednesday and not a week later.
You mentioned that it's going to have to be somebody that can work across the aisle, work with Democrats, and at least some sort of divided government. That was really one of the main reasons that Kevin McCarthy was ousted by the small number of Republicans that didn't give him the support that he needed, was that he worked across the aisle too much. Do you think that problem has been overcome now that we've seen over 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks of this chaos in the Congress? Do you think that that's not going to be the issue anymore?
It depends on the candidate. Now, Kevin had some trust issues with Democrats. He spent a lot of time railing against Democrats, blaming them for everything. That's what we do. We just point at the other side. So Kevin had some trust issues. Every Democrat voted with the 8 on October 3rd, voted with the 8 Republicans to fire him. So it depends on who the candidate is. If that candidate is somebody who has a known ability, maybe as a chairman of a committee with a great working relationship with a ranking member and the rank and file on the other side of the aisle, like a Patrick McHenry, then perhaps so. But I do think there are going to be some litmus tests for Democrats before they would ever be willing to lay down for a Republican speaker. And some of those litmus tests are likely going to be whether they objected to the January 6th certification, shutting the government down on the CR. There were 90 Republicans that voted to shut the government down. And then there were other issues like Ukraine funding, Israel funding, some of those kinds of things, and appropriations. What levels are we going to write these approps bills to for FY24, which we're well into now? So I think those are going to be a litmus test of sorts for Democrats, but we'll see when next week unfolds.
All right, before we wrap up here, because we've got a time limit, I know you're busy and you want to probably get to the district too. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on where we are with this Israeli situation, how the U.S. government has expressed itself and has worked. Are you generally pretty pleased with the response from the American government?
Pretty much so. I've been so consumed with what we've had going on here, plus my appropriations work. Haven't spent a lot of time, kind of on a deep dive. I've served over there. I commanded troops in the Sinai Peninsula back in 2002, so I'm very familiar with the area. Roby, I used to sit at Foxtrot 103, a little observation post right outside the Gaza Strip with my buddy from Fiji, and I would watch in the night. I would watch Hamas and some of those rogue people do things to Israel, and then the next day Israel come in there and just wipe it clean. So I'm very familiar with the area. It breaks my heart. It was more or less an unprovoked attack. It was a surprise attack. There were some intelligence failures. We'll all figure that out in the postmortem. But a lot of innocents died, and it breaks our hearts, and babies and elderly, and the people who have been taken hostage, and this ground invasion that is sure to happen in Gaza. It's going to be an ugly, bloody scenario. But look, they're our ally. They are our friends. We rely on one another, and I will continue to support Israel in its quest to at least achieve a little justice in this particular situation.
All right, 30 seconds left. Tell me who you might cast your vote for Speaker of the House next week.
Won't be able to know until I hear, first of all, we have till noon Sunday to, for the candidates to be known. And then we need to hear from them. And look, I got friends. They're all my friends. They are my colleagues. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to see what their hopes and dreams are. I want to check their leadership credentials, maybe look a little bit at their voting records before I decide who it's going to be that I'm going to be shouting on the floor of the House. And I hope it's an enthusiastic response and not one out of fear that we just saw play out this week.
All right. He's Congressman Steve Womack, represents the 3rd District of Arkansas. Always a pleasure to visit with you. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Roby.